The copper pipe pressed against my shoulder blade like a cold accusation as I worked beneath the kitchen sink, installing the new shutoff valve that would complete our month-long renovation project. The Italian marble countertops gleamed above me, catching the afternoon light streaming through windows I'd personally replaced. Every inch of this kitchen bore my fingerprints. From the custom cabinets I'd built in my workshop to the subway tile backsplash I'd laid by hand. My name is David Fairburn, and I'm what you might call a Renaissance contractor. Started as a CPA 15 years ago, but discovered I preferred building things that lasted over shuffling papers that didn't matter. These days, I run Fairburn Construction, specializing in high-end residential work for folks who appreciate craftsmanship. The irony wasn't lost on me that my financial background made me the only contractor in town who actually understood profit margins and tax implications. The front door opened with its familiar squeak, another item on my endless honey-do list. My wife Laura's voice carried into the kitchen, followed by the sharp click of heels I recognized as belonging to her sister Rachel. "David's still working on that sink," Laura said, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when discussing my projects, somewhere between pride and impatience. "He's been obsessing over every detail for weeks." I smiled to myself, adjusting the wrench. Obsessing was her word for perfectionism, but after 12 years of marriage, I'd learned to translate Laura's vocabulary. She appreciated the results, even if she questioned the process. "You always were lucky to find someone so handy," Rachel replied, her voice closer now. I heard the refrigerator open, followed by the clink of wine glasses being retrieved from the cabinet above my head. Lucky. That was Rachel's way of reducing our entire relationship to chance, rather than acknowledging that Laura and I had built something solid together. Rachel had always viewed marriage as a transaction rather than a partnership, which probably explained her 3 divorces. The wine bottle opened with a soft pop, and I heard liquid being poured. Tuesday afternoon wine wasn't unusual for Laura. She worked in pharmaceutical sales and often entertained clients with liquid lunches that bled into liquid afternoons. Her territory covered half of Texas, and her commission checks reflected her success. "So," Rachel said, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a whisper, "have you told him you're moving out next month?" My wrench froze mid-turn. "No way," Laura replied without hesitation. "I need to secure my promotion first, then take half the accounts. The timing has to be perfect." The copper pipe suddenly felt like ice against my neck. I forced myself to remain perfectly still, controlling my breathing like I'd learned during my brief stint in the Army Reserve 20 years ago. The cabinet space was cramped, my knees pressed against the back wall, but I'd never been more grateful for the awkward positioning that kept me hidden. "But David's not stupid," Rachel continued. "He handles all your finances, doesn't he? Won't he notice if you start moving money around?" Laura laughed, a sound I'd heard thousands of times, but never quite like this. Calculating, almost carnivory. "That's the beauty of it. He trusts me completely. Besides, I'm not talking about our joint accounts. I mean the client accounts I manage at work. When I get promoted to regional manager, I'll have access to the entire Southwest Territory. I can transfer my best clients to a new company and take them with me when I leave." "That's brilliant," Rachel said, genuine admiration in her voice. "But what about the house? You two built this place together." "We built it with my money," Laura corrected sharply. "My commissions paid for most of the construction costs. David contributed labor, but labor doesn't equal ownership in a divorce court. My lawyer says I should be able to claim at least 60% of the property value." The wrench in my hand had become slippery with sweat. I adjusted my grip, fighting the urge to crawl out from under the sink and confront them immediately. But something, maybe my CPA training, maybe just survival instinct, kept me frozen in place, listening. "What about custody?" Rachel asked. "Beth and Janie adore David." "They're 12 and 10, Laura said dismissively. "They'll adjust. Besides, David travels constantly for work. I can argue that I'm the more stable parent. The courts usually favor mothers anyway." I thought about my daughters, probably upstairs doing homework right now, trusting that their parents' marriage was as solid as the house we'd built around them. Beth, my serious 12-year-old, who helped me in the workshop every weekend, learning to use power tools with the same precision she applied to her math homework. Janie, 10 years old and still young enough to believe that families stayed together forever. "The promotion interview is next Friday," Laura continued. "Once that's locked down, I'll file the papers. David will be blindsided. He still thinks we're planning that anniversary trip to Italy next spring. Rachel laughed. You've thought of everything. What about his reaction? David's not exactly the type to roll over quietly. What's he gonna do? Laura's voice carried a smugness that made my jaw clench. He's a contractor, not a lawyer. He'll hire some local attorney who will tell him to be reasonable and split everything 50-50. By the time he understands what's happening, I'll be in my new position with my new territory, and he'll be lucky to keep the workshop. The workshop. My sanctuary, where I'd spent countless hours building furniture, repairing neighbors' projects, and teaching my daughters that working with your hands was just as valuable as working with your mind. The space where I'd crafted every custom piece in this house, from the dining room table to the built-in bookshelves in the living room. You should see his face when he talks about that stupid workshop, Laura continued. He acts like it's some kind of temple. It'll eliminate him to lose it, but that's what happens when you marry someone more ambitious than you are. I'd heard enough, more than enough, but I forced myself to remain still as they continued discussing logistics. When to serve papers, which attorney to use, how to handle the social fallout in our close-knit neighborhood. They talked about dismantling my life with the same casual efficiency most people use to plan a dinner party. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, Rachel announced she had to leave for a hair appointment. I listened to their goodbyes, the front door closing, Laura's heels clicking across the hardwood floors I'd refinished last summer. Only when I heard her car pull out of the driveway did I finally crawl out from under the sink. I sat on the kitchen floor for a long time, staring at the cabinet I'd just repaired. The irony was overwhelming. I'd spent the last month perfecting every detail of this kitchen renovation, creating a space where Laura could entertain clients and host dinner parties, never suspecting she was planning to take it all away. My phone buzzed with a text message. Laura, running to grocery store. Dinner at 7, love you. Love you. The words that had anchored our marriage for 12 years, now revealed as either a lie or a cruel joke. I stood up slowly, my knees protesting after the cramped positioning. The kitchen looked perfect, magazine-worthy even. The kind of space that would photograph beautifully for a real estate listing. Walking to my workshop, I pulled out a yellow legal pad and began writing. Not an angry rant or an emotional outburst, but a methodical list. If Laura wanted to play games with our finances and our family's future, she'd chosen the wrong opponent. After all, she'd forgotten one crucial detail about her handy husband. I wasn't just a contractor who happened to understand money. I was a CPA who happened to be very, very good with tools. The next morning, I woke up at 5:30 as usual, made coffee, and reviewed the notes I'd written the night before. Laura slept peacefully beside me, her blonde hair spread across the pillow, looking exactly like the woman I'd fallen in love with 13 years ago. The woman who'd supported my career change from accounting to construction, who'd celebrated every successful project, who'd stood beside me at countless neighborhood barbecues, introducing me as my brilliant husband who can build anything. Lies, apparently. All of it. But as I watched her sleep, I realized something important. I had 5 days to prepare before her promotion interview. 5 days to ensure that when Laura's carefully orchestrated plan unfolded, she'd discover that her stupid contractor husband had been several moves ahead all along. I dressed quietly and headed downstairs to make breakfast. Tuesday mornings meant pancakes, a tradition I'd started when the girls were small. Beth appeared first, already dressed for school, her dark hair pulled back and the practical ponytail she preferred. "Morning, Dad," she said, sliding onto one of the bar stools I'd built for the kitchen island. "Mom said you fixed the sink yesterday." "All done," I replied, flipping pancakes with more care than usual. Everything felt different now, sharper somehow. "No more dripping?" Janie bounced down the stairs wearing mismatched socks and a smile that could power the entire neighborhood. "Pancakes! You're the best dad ever." The best dad ever. Words that hit differently when you knew someone was planning to limit your access to the people who mattered most. Laura appeared 20 minutes later, perfectly dressed for another day of pharmaceutical sales. She kissed my cheek and poured herself coffee in the travel mug I'd given her last Christmas. "The kitchen looks amazing," she said, surveying the completed renovation. "You really outdid yourself this time." "Thanks," I replied, watching her face carefully. No guilt, no hesitation, no sign that she'd spent yesterday afternoon planning my destruction. I wanted it to be perfect. "It is perfect," she said, checking her phone. "I've got client meetings all day, but I should be home by 6. Can you handle dinner?" "Of course." I'd been handling dinner most nights for the past 5 years, ever since Laura's territory expanded and her travel schedule intensified. Anything special you want? Surprise me, she said, kissing me goodbye. The same routine we'd followed for years, except now I knew it was all performance. After the girls left for school and Laura drove away, I called my office and told my project manager I'd be working from home for the rest of the week. Then I settled into my workshop with a cup of coffee and began making phone calls. The first call went to Janet Morrison, our accountant. Janet had handled our taxes for 8 years and knew our financial situation better than anyone. David, how's the kitchen renovation going? Finished yesterday, I said. Janet, I need to ask you about something confidential. Hypothetically, if someone wanted to protect assets in advance of a potential divorce, what would be the best approach? The line went quiet for a moment. David, is everything okay? Just exploring options, I said carefully. Hypothetically. Well, hypothetically, Janet said, the key would be documenting separate property versus marital property. If one spouse contributed significantly more to major purchases, that could be relevant. Also, any assets held in trust prior to marriage would typically remain separate property. What about business assets? If someone owned a construction company, for example, business assets acquired during marriage are generally considered marital property. But if one spouse built the business through their own labor and expertise, while the other spouse pursued a separate career, that could affect the division. Documentation would be crucial. I spent 20 minutes taking notes, learning about asset protection strategies I'd never needed to consider. Janet didn't ask why I was suddenly interested in divorce law, and I didn't volunteer the information. The second call went to Mike Harrison, an attorney who'd handled several real estate transactions for my business. Mike and I had played poker together for 6 years, and I trusted him to be discreet. David, good to hear from you. What's going on? Mike, I need some legal advice. Confidentially? Shoot, if someone discovered their spouse was planning to file for divorce and attempt to claim assets they hadn't contributed to, what would be the best defensive strategy? Mike whistled softly. Damn, David. I'm sorry to hear this. Is it Laura? Can we keep this hypothetical for now? Sure. Hypothetically, the key would be documentation and timing. If you can prove separate contributions to major assets, that helps. If you can demonstrate that your spouse was planning to commit fraud, say, by stealing client accounts from their employer, that could affect the division significantly. What about custody? Texas courts focus on the best interests of the children. Stability, involvement in their lives, moral character, all of that matters. If one parent was planning to uproot the children's lives for purely financial gain, that wouldn't look good. I spent another 30 minutes learning about divorce strategy, taking notes like I was preparing for the most important exam of my life. Which, in a way, I was. The third call was the most important. I dialed the main number for Pinnacle Pharmaceuticals, Laura's employer. Pinnacle Pharmaceuticals, how may I direct your call? Human resources, please. I need to speak with someone about reporting a potential ethics violation. The transfer took 2 minutes. When the HR representative answered, I took a deep breath. I'd like to report a potential conflict of interest involving one of your sales managers. I have reason to believe that Laura Fairburn is planning to use her position to steal client accounts for a competitor. Can you provide more details about this allegation? She's currently being considered for promotion to regional manager. If she receives that promotion, she's planning to take proprietary client information to a new company. I overheard her discussing this plan yesterday. Are you willing to provide a statement? I am, but I'd prefer to remain anonymous if possible. This involves my wife. The conversation lasted 15 minutes. By the end, I'd provided enough information to trigger an internal investigation. The HR representative assured me that all promotion decisions would be frozen pending the investigation's outcome. Laura's carefully planned timeline had just hit its first obstacle. I spent the rest of the day reviewing our financial records, documenting every contribution I'd made to our major assets. The house construction costs, paid for with Laura's commissions but built with my labor and expertise. The workshop, constructed entirely with my own hands on land we'd purchased together. The girls' college funds, which I'd managed and grown through careful investment strategies. When Laura came home that evening, I was cooking dinner and humming along to the radio. She looked tired but pleased with herself. Good day? I asked, stirring the pasta sauce. Very good. I think the promotion interview is going to go well on Friday. I hope so, I said, meaning it in ways she couldn't possibly understand. You deserve everything that's coming to you. She smiled and kissed my cheek. You're the best husband ever. The best husband ever. Just like Janie was the best dad ever. Funny how the people planning to betray you always seem to use superlatives. Thursday morning brought the first crack in Laura's foundation. She came downstairs looking confused, checking her phone repeatedly. Everything okay? I asked, pouring coffee into her travel mug. It's weird, she said, frowning at her screen. I just got a call from HR. They want to meet with me this afternoon about my promotion interview. They said there are some questions they need to address first. I made appropriate concerned husband noises while internally celebrating. The investigation had moved faster than I'd expected. I'm sure it's just routine, I said. Maybe they want to discuss your territory expansion plans. Maybe. But she didn't look convinced. After Laura left for work, I focused on phase 2 of my defensive strategy. I drove to First National Bank, where we'd maintained our accounts for 8 years, and requested a meeting with the branch manager. Mr. Fairburn, good to see you. How can I help you today? I need to restructure some of our accounts, I said, sliding a folder across her desk. I want to establish a revocable trust for our major assets, with specific provisions for asset protection. The process took 3 hours, but by the time I left the bank, the house deed had been transferred to the Fairburn Family Trust, with me as the primary trustee. Our joint savings account had been restructured to require both signatures for withdrawals over $500. The girls' college funds had been moved to educational trusts that couldn't be touched in a divorce proceeding. All completely legal, all properly documented, all designed to protect what I'd worked 12 years to build. My phone rang as I was driving home. Laura's name appeared on the screen. David, can you talk? Sure, what's up? The meeting with HR was... She paused, and I could hear the stress in her voice. They're investigating some kind of ethics complaint. Someone reported that I'm planning to steal client accounts. That's ridiculous, I said, injecting just the right amount of outrage into my voice. Who would make such an accusation? They won't tell me. It's anonymous. But David, they've frozen my promotion pending the investigation. This could ruin everything. Everything. She had no idea how right she was. I'm sure it will work out, I said. You're one of their best performers. They know your character. I hope so. I can't believe someone would try to sabotage my career like this. The irony was almost overwhelming. Laura was upset about someone sabotaging her career while she'd been planning to sabotage our entire family. We'll get through this, I said. Whatever happens, we'll handle it together. Thank you, she said, and for a moment she sounded like the woman I'd married. I love you, David. I love you too, I replied. And surprisingly, part of me still meant it. That evening, Laura was quiet during dinner. The girls chattered about school projects and weekend plans, but Laura barely participated. She kept checking her phone, as if expecting news that would fix everything. After the girls went upstairs to do homework, Laura poured herself a large glass of wine and sat beside me on the couch. David, I need to ask you something. My pulse quickened. What's on your mind? If something happened to my job, if this investigation goes badly, would we be okay financially? I pretended to consider the question. It would be tight, but we'd manage. The construction business is doing well, and we've got savings. Why? I just keep thinking about how much we've built together. This house, our life, the girl's future. I couldn't bear to lose any of it. She had no idea how prophetic her words were. We won't lose anything, I said, putting my arm around her. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. She leaned against me, and for a moment, I remembered why I'd fallen in love with her. Before the ambition consumed her, before the lies began, Laura had been my partner in every sense of the word. We'd dreamed together, planned together, built a life together. But people change. And sometimes when they change, they reveal who they really were all along. Friday morning arrived, gray and drizzly, matching Laura's mood. She'd barely slept, tossing and turning while I lay beside her, wide awake, thinking about what the day would bring. I don't know if I should even go to this interview, she said, staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. How can I interview for a promotion while I'm under investigation? You have to try, I said. Show them you're confident in your integrity. She nodded, but her hands shook as she applied her makeup. The woman who'd faced down hostile clients and dominated sales meetings was falling apart because someone had disrupted her carefully laid plans. After she left, I called Mike Harrison. David, how are you holding up? Better than expected. I need to ask you about timing. If someone were to file for divorce, while their spouse was under investigation for workplace ethics violations, how would that affect the proceedings? It would be very bad for the spouse under investigation, Mike said immediately. Courts don't like it when one party is facing potential criminal charges or professional sanctions. It suggests poor judgment and moral character. What if the investigation revealed that the spouse had been planning to commit fraud? That would be devastating in a divorce proceeding. The court would view it as evidence of dishonesty and financial irresponsibility. It could affect everything: asset division, custody, even spousal support. Hypothetically, when would be the best time to file papers? Right after the investigation concludes, assuming it goes badly for your wife. The timing would demonstrate that you're responding to newly discovered information about her character. I spent the morning preparing documents I hoped I'd never need to use. Divorce papers, asset inventories, custody petitions, all the legal ammunition necessary to protect my daughters and myself from Laura's betrayal. At 3 o'clock, my phone rang. Laura's name on the screen. "David, I need you to come pick me up." "What happened?" "They fired me." Her voice was flat, emotionless. The investigation found evidence that I was planning to violate my non-compete agreement. They terminated me immediately. "I'm on my way." I found Laura sitting in the Pinnacle Pharmaceuticals parking lot, looking smaller than I'd seen her in years. She got into my truck without speaking, staring straight ahead as I drove home. "How did they find evidence?" she finally asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. I'd only reported what I'd overheard. I hadn't provided any physical evidence. "Someone recorded me," she said quietly. "They had audio of me discussing client accounts with Rachel. Someone was listening to our private conversation." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. She was closer to the truth than she knew. "Who would do something like that?" "I don't know," she said, "but I'm going to find out. And when I do, I'm going to destroy them." The woman sitting beside me was a stranger. The Laura I'd married wouldn't have talked about destroying people. But then again, the Laura I'd married wouldn't have planned to steal from her employer and abandon her family. We drove home in silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts. Laura was probably planning her next move, figuring out how to salvage her career and her schemes. I was planning something entirely different. That weekend, everything came apart. Laura spent Saturday morning on the phone with employment attorneys, trying to find someone who would help her fight Pinnacle's decision. She'd transformed our bedroom into a war room, with legal documents spread across the bed and her laptop open to job search websites. "They can't just fire me based on an anonymous tip," she said, pacing while talking to her third lawyer of the day. "There has to be due process." I was in the workshop, ostensibly organizing tools, but actually listening to every word through the baby monitor I'd installed years ago, when Janie was afraid of sleeping alone. The monitor's receiver sat on my workbench, broadcasting Laura's increasingly desperate conversations. "What do you mean, at-will employment? I've been with this company for 8 years. The lawyer's response was apparently not what she wanted to hear. Laura's voice rose to a near shout. "Find me something. I don't care what it costs." By Sunday evening, she'd spoken with 6 attorneys and received the same message from all of them. Pinnacle had acted within their rights, and she had no legal recourse. That's when she called Rachel. "I need you to come over," Laura said into her phone. "We need to talk about accelerating our timeline." I was reading bedtime stories to Janie when Rachel arrived. After tucking my daughter into bed, I positioned myself at the top of the stairs, where I could hear their conversation in the living room below. "This is a disaster," Laura said. "Without the promotion, I can't access the client accounts. And without a job, I can't support myself during a divorce." "Maybe you should reconsider," Rachel said. "David's a good guy. He'll support you while you look for another job." "You don't understand," Laura snapped. "This isn't about finding another job. Someone deliberately sabotaged my career. Someone who knew about our plans." "You think David knows?" The question hung in the air for a long moment. "I don't see how he could," Laura finally said. "But the timing is too convenient. Right before my promotion interview, right when everything was falling into place. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to confront him, tonight. If David knows something, I need to find out how much." My blood went cold. I'd been prepared for many scenarios, but not for Laura to suspect me this quickly. I heard footsteps on the stairs and quickly moved to our bedroom, grabbing a book and settling into the reading chair by the window. Laura appeared in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "David, we need to talk." "Sure," I said, closing the book. "What's on your mind?" She sat on the edge of the bed, studying my face. I've been thinking about the timing of this investigation. It's very convenient that someone reported me right before my promotion. Convenient how? Someone who knew about my career plans would have known that the promotion was crucial. Someone who wanted to hurt me would have known exactly when to strike. I met her gaze steadily. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that someone close to me betrayed me. Someone who had access to private information. Laura, you're upset and looking for someone to blame. But maybe you should consider that your own actions created this situation. Her eyes flashed. My own actions? What actions? This was the moment. I could continue pretending or I could end the charade. I chose honesty. The actions you discussed with Rachel last Tuesday afternoon in our kitchen while I was fixing the sink. The color drained from Laura's face. For several seconds, she didn't speak. You were listening? I was working. You were plotting. There's a difference. She stood up slowly, her hands clenched into fists. You son of a witch! You destroyed my career. I protected my family, I said calmly. There's a difference. Your family, I'm your family. Not according to the conversation I overheard. According to that conversation, you were planning to steal from your employer? Divorce me, take half our assets, and limit my access to my daughters. That doesn't sound like family behavior. Laura's composure finally cracked. You had no right to interfere with my life. I had every right to protect myself and my children from your lies. My lies? You're the one who's been lying, acting like the perfect husband while you were sabotaging everything I worked for. I stood up, and something in my expression must have warned her, because she took a step back. Everything you worked for was built on a foundation of betrayal, I said quietly. You were planning to destroy our marriage, steal from your employer, and use our children as pawns in your scheme. I simply made sure that when you pulled the trigger, the tool would be pointing at you instead of us. Us? There is no us anymore. There hasn't been for months. Then we agree on something. The words hung between us like a blade. Laura's face went through a series of expressions: rage, hurt, calculation, and finally, cold determination. Fine, she said. If that's how you want to play this, then let's play. I want a divorce, David. I want half of everything we've built, and I want primary custody of the girls. I almost smiled. You're welcome to try. Try? I don't have to try. I know my rights. Do you? Because I spent the last week learning about mine. I walked to the dresser and pulled out a folder I'd prepared for this moment. These are the asset protection documents I filed on Thursday. The house is now held in trust, with specific provisions for protecting it from fraudulent claims. Our savings accounts require dual signatures for major withdrawals. The girls' college funds are in educational trusts that can't be touched in a divorce. Laura grabbed the folder, her hands shaking as she read. You can't do this. These documents are... When did you... Thursday, the same day you were fired for planning to commit fraud. She looked up at me with pure hatred. I'll fight this. I'll take you to court and prove that you manipulated our assets to hide them from me. Good luck with that. Everything I did was legal, properly documented, and designed to protect assets I contributed to our marriage. Meanwhile, you're unemployed, facing potential criminal charges for attempted fraud, and documented as having planned to steal from your employer. Criminal charges? Pinnacle is considering pressing charges for attempted theft of proprietary information. Your conversation with Rachel constitutes conspiracy to commit fraud. The folder slipped from Laura's hands, scattering papers across the floor. She stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. Who are you? She whispered. I'm the man who spent 12 years building a life with someone I thought I knew, I said. I'm the father who won't let his children be used as weapons in their mother's war against their family. I'm the husband who trusted his wife completely until she gave me reason not to. Laura bent down and began gathering the scattered papers, her movements mechanical and defeated. This isn't over, she said without looking at me. Yes, it is, I replied. It's been over since last Tuesday afternoon. You just didn't know it yet. She left the room without another word. I heard her on the phone downstairs, presumably calling Rachel to report that their plans had imploded. Then I heard the front door close and her car start. I walked to the window and watched her taillights disappear down our street, past the houses of neighbors who still thought we had the perfect marriage. Tomorrow I would call Mike Harrison and begin divorce proceedings. Tomorrow I would start the legal process of protecting my daughters from the chaos their mother had created. But tonight, I sat in the chair by the window and grieved for the marriage that had died last Tuesday afternoon, eliminated by words spoken over wine glasses in the kitchen I'd built with my own hands. Laura didn't come home that night, or the next night. She was staying with Rachel, according to the text message she sent Tuesday morning. Need time to think. Don't contact me. I didn't contact her. Instead, I focused on my daughters, who were confused by their mother's sudden absence, but not yet alarmed. Laura traveled frequently for work, so her being gone wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the tension they could sense, the way conversations stopped when they entered rooms. "Is Mom okay?" Beth asked Wednesday evening as I helped her with algebra homework. "She's dealing with some work problems," I said, which was technically true. "She needs some space to figure things out." "Are you and Mom fighting?" The question every parent dreads, asked with the directness only children possess. "We're having some disagreements," I admitted. "But whatever happens between your mother and me, it doesn't change how much we both love you and Janie." Beth studied my face with the intensity she inherited from me. "Are you getting divorced?" I couldn't lie to her. "I don't know yet. Maybe." She nodded solemnly, processing this information with more maturity than most adults would have shown. "If you do get divorced, can Janie and I stay with you?" The question broke my heart and filled me with determination at the same time. "I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure you and your sister are safe and happy," I said. "That's a promise." Thursday morning brought a call from Mike Harrison. "David, Laura's attorney contacted me. She wants to discuss settlement terms." "Already?" "Apparently she's eager to resolve this quickly. Her lawyer mentioned something about relocating for a new job opportunity." Of course she did. Laura was trying to cut her losses and run, probably hoping to salvage something before her situation got worse. What kind of settlement is she proposing? 50-50 split of all assets, joint custody with her having primary residence, and spousal support for 3 years while she reestablishes her career. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "She's delusional. That's what I told her attorney. Given the circumstances of her termination and the evidence of planned fraud, she's in no position to make demands. What's our counteroffer? I was thinking we start with you keeping the house and workshop, since you built both and they're now held in trust. She gets her personal property and half the liquid assets. You get primary custody, she gets supervised visitation until she can demonstrate stability." Supervised visitation? David, she was planning to uproot the children's lives for purely financial gain, and she's currently unemployed with potential criminal charges pending. Any family court judge is going to question her fitness as a primary parent. We spent an hour discussing strategy. By the time I hung up, I felt cautiously optimistic that this nightmare might end without destroying my daughters' lives. That optimism lasted until Friday afternoon when Laura showed up at the house. I was in the workshop when I heard her car in the driveway. Through the window, I watched her get out and walk toward the front door like she still lived here. She was dressed professionally, carrying a briefcase, looking like she was preparing for a business meeting, rather than confronting her estranged husband. I met her at the front door before she could use her key. "The girls are at school," I said. "What do you want?" "I want to talk about our situation like adults. Adults don't plan to steal from their employers and betray their families." She flinched, but maintained her composure. "Can I come in? This is still my house, too." I stepped aside and let her enter. She walked to the living room and sat on the couch like nothing had changed, like we were still the couple who'd hosted dinner parties and watched movies together on the same furniture. "I've been thinking about everything that happened," she said. "I made some mistakes." "Mistakes?" "I was angry about my career stagnating. I felt like you didn't understand the pressure I was under to succeed. I said things I didn't mean." I stared at her, amazed by her ability to rewrite history in real time. "You didn't say things you didn't mean, Laura. You planned things you absolutely meant. You were going to steal client accounts, divorce me, and take the children. That wasn't anger talking. That was calculation. I never would have actually taken the children away from you." "Really? Because I have a recording that suggests otherwise." Her composure cracked slightly. "You recorded me?" "I recorded everything after I realized what you were planning. Insurance, in case you tried to deny it later." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. "What do you want from me, David?" "I want you to sign the divorce papers without fighting. I want you to agree to joint custody with me having primary residence. I want you to take responsibility for the choices that brought us here. And if I don't? Then we go to court, and a judge gets to hear the recordings of you planning to commit fraud and abandon your family. Your choice. Laura stood up and walked to the kitchen, running her hand along the countertops I'd installed. I did love you, she said quietly. In the beginning, I really did love you. I know, I said. I loved you too. That's what makes this so heartbreaking. She turned to face me, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd married, vulnerable, uncertain, human. I'm scared, David. I don't know what I'm going to do without my career, without this house, without the girls. You should have thought about that before you decided to blow up our lives. The vulnerability disappeared, replaced by the cold calculation I'd come to recognize. Fine, she said. I'll sign your papers. But I want half the liquid assets, and I want unsupervised visitation. Deal, I said, surprising her with my quick agreement. She'd expected a fight, but I knew something she didn't. Half the liquid assets amounted to less than $20,000 after my strategic restructuring, and unsupervised visitation was meaningless if she was planning to relocate anyway. We shook hands like business partners, concluding a transaction, which I suppose we were. Laura left that afternoon, and I never saw her again as my wife. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later, exactly as we'd agreed. She took her half of the liquid assets, packed her personal belongings, and moved to Arizona for a pharmaceutical sales job that paid half what she'd been making in Texas. The girls visited her twice, once during spring break, once during summer vacation. Both times they came home early complaining that their mother's new apartment was small and that she worked constantly. After the second visit, Beth asked if they had to keep going. Your mother loves you, I said, but if you're not comfortable with the visits, we can discuss alternatives. We never discussed alternatives because Laura stopped requesting them. Her new life apparently didn't have room for the daughters she'd once planned to use as leverage. 6 months after the divorce was final, I received a letter from Pinnacle Pharmaceuticals' legal department. They'd decided not to press criminal charges against Laura, but they were pursuing civil action to recover damages related to her planned theft of proprietary information. The letter requested my cooperation as a witness. I provided my testimony and the recordings I'd made, helping Pinnacle recover damages that ultimately bankrupted Laura's fresh start in Arizona. She declared personal bankruptcy and moved back to Texas, working for a small medical supply company at a fraction of her former salary. The girls and I stayed in the house I'd built, in the neighborhood where we'd made friends, in the life Laura had tried to destroy. Beth continued helping me in the workshop, learning carpentry skills that would serve her well in engineering school. Janie discovered a talent for design, sketching furniture pieces I could build for her friends' bedrooms. We were a family, smaller than before, but stronger. 2 years after the divorce, I met Sarah Chen at a neighborhood barbecue. She was a widow with a teenage son, a pediatric nurse who understood the challenges of single parenthood. We took things slowly, building trust the way I built houses, with careful attention to foundation and structure. Sarah never tried to replace the girl's mother. Instead, she became something Laura had never been, a true partner who supported our family without trying to control or manipulate it. The day Sarah and I got married, in the backyard of the house I'd built, Beth served as my best man, and Janie walked Sarah down the aisle. It was a small ceremony, attended by neighbors who'd watched our family rebuild itself from the wreckage of Laura's betrayal. Laura didn't attend. She'd moved to Oklahoma by then, working for another medical supply company, living in a studio apartment alone. Sometimes I wondered if she ever thought about what she'd lost. Not just the house or the money, but the chance to watch her daughters grow up. The opportunity to be part of something bigger than her own ambition. But mostly, I didn't think about Laura at all. I was too busy living the life she'd tried to take away, surrounded by people who understood that families are built on trust, not schemes. I was too busy teaching my daughters that integrity matters more than success, that keeping your word matters more than getting ahead. I was too busy being grateful that I'd been under the sink that Tuesday afternoon, in the right place at the right time, to hear the truth about the woman I'd married. The truth that set me free